Hi guy, welcome back TV spoilers. In Genoa City right now, every relationship feels like it's balanced on a taut wiry on light touch and the whole line begins to vibrate. For Phyllis, that tension is never accidental. She knows how to turn worry into an interrogation, turn a vague signal into evidence, and turn someone else's love into something that must be explained properly. Daniel, after too many fractures and too many lessons earned the hard way, is drifting into a new emotional space with Tessa on that is both tender and dangerous. Because it arrives at the exact moment Tessa is unthreading her life from her marriage to Mariah. When a relationship begins in a landscape that complicated, anyone standing nearby can become a catalyst. And Phyllis' instincts for protection, possession, and control are always disguised as concern for her son chooses to be the spark. Phyllis starts with her most familiar weapon, questions. No shouting, no obvious accusations. Just a gaze that watches, measures, and weighs Daniel as if she's already found the flaw, simply hasn't admitted it yet. To Phyllis, Daniel isn't just an adult with the right to make his own choices. Daniel is the son she has fought for through chaos and consequence. The proof that her sacrifices meant something. Anything that touches Daniel in her mind must pass through her. So the growing closeness between Daniel and Tessa won't let her sit still. Phyllis notices how Daniel speaks about Tessa differently than he has about anyone else lately, softer, lighter, and worst of all with hope. Hope frightens Phyllis, because the moment Daniel believes he can start over, he no longer needs his mother's grip to keep him steady. Daniel tries to stay calm. He reminds himself he's not a kid who has to justify his life to keep the peace. He's paid for impulsive choices, carried responsibility, and grown tired enough to understand that love cannot survive if it's put on trial. But Phyllis doesn't ask to understand. Phyllis asks to create an opening. She guides Daniel through details, timelines, and tiny moments that reveal how attached he's become to Tessa. Then she circles back to the one fact she knows she can sharpen into a blade. Tessa has chosen to divorce Mariah. Phyllis frames it as a warning sign that cannot be ignored, as if Tessa is rushing to grab whatever comfort she can. And the anger in Phyllis ignites at the exact point she senses something she can't tolerate. Daniel and Tessa have crossed the line if they've spent the night together. Then in Phyllis's eyes, this is no longer a cautious romance. It's a ticking bomb, and she believes she has the right to cut the wire or redirect the explosion into something she can control. While Phyllis builds her storm out of questions, Tessa is living inside a different storm, quieter, but deeper. The divorce from Mariah isn't a simple formality. It's an admission that she couldn't keep a promise. And it's also a release from a marriage both women dragged forward, long after their hearts stopped facing the same direction. Tessa carries the guilt like a bruise she can't show, and that makes her crave moments that feel honest. Moments that prove she can still choose her life instead of enduring it. Daniel doesn't appear as a savior. He appears as someone on the same frequency as Samin, who understands exhaustion, who doesn't demand perfection, and who makes Tessa believe she's still worthy of peace. That is why Tessa's reaction is striking. She's usually composed. She usually avoids escalation. At first, she tries to stay out of Phyllis's line of fire. She doesn't want her life to become a battlefield again. And she doesn't want a new relationship to begin in side armor. But Phyllis's interference doesn't remain at the level of hints. It slips into Daniel's space, into his silences, into the questions he didn't have until his mother planted them. Tessa senses the shift quickly. She notices how Daniel hesitates more, how he pauses longer before answering a message, how his body begins to brace as if he's being pulled back into an old orbit. Tessa understands what Phyllis is doing. She doesn't have to strike directly. She only has to plant doubt, and fear will do the rest. The moment Daniel and Tessa share something romantic, something that should belong only to them, becomes the perfect trigger for Phyllis. It doesn't have to be loud or public or declared. It only has to be intimate enough to confirm they are no longer just friends. Phyllis sees it by accident, and in that instant, her worry hardens into a cold decision. She won't allow Daniel to be pulled into another complicated life. She won't allow Tessa to become the person who holds power over Daniel's emotions. For Phyllis, witnessing intimacy isn't proof of happiness. It's proof that Daniel is moving too fast and that Phyllis is being left behind. So Phyllis approaches Daniel the way she always does when she wants to win. She doesn't attack with open hatred. She attacks with reason. She chooses her words so she won't look like the villain. She questions Tessa's motives. the future of a relationship that begins right after a divorce decision. The possibility that Daniel is becoming a temporary landing place for someone who needs comfort. She reminds Daniel of every time he was hurt, every time he trusted the wrong person, every time hope turned into regret. She speaks as if she's helping him protect himself. But the truth is she's pulling him back into the position she understands best: a man who must always be on guard. And the cruel brilliance of the tactic is that she doesn't need to lie. She only needs to select the right truths, enlarge them, and press them into Daniel's weakest places. Daniel doesn't fall for it all at once, but he can't fully resist it either. He wants to trust Tessa. He wants to believe there are relationships that don't require power games. Yet Phyllis hits the oldest wound: the fear that he's repeating a pattern, that he's stepping into someone else's unfinished story. Daniel hates the sensation of being dragged back into suspicion. He hates being forced to see Tessa through his mother's lens. But he also knows Phyllis never says anything without purpose. So even as he tries to hold his ground, the seed of doubt lands inside him like a chill he can't name. Tessa recognizes the manipulation not because anyone tells her, but because the air around Daniel changes. She becomes furious not only because Phyllis is interfering, but because she understands how quickly that kind of interference can kill love before it learns how to breathe. Tessa isn't in the stage of quietly absorbing disrespect anymore. She has already chosen to end a marriage in order to live more truthfully. She will not enter a new relationship with her head bowed. If she allows Phyllis to pull strings now, she will be trapped forever in the role of the outsider, the one who must prove she belongs. Tessa refuses to love from a position of permission. She wants love from a position of equality. So she chooses direct confrontation. She goes to where Phyllis feels most at home, her territory at the Grand Phoenix, in purpose. It isn't coincidence. That space carries power, image, and control, the exact tools Phyllis prefers. Tessa steps into that environment like someone walking into a room that could become a psychological game at any second, but she does not come to play. She comes to set a boundary. No begging, no trembling, no bargaining through fear. Just clarity, strong enough to make Phyllis understand she is facing someone who has lost too much to keep, living by someone else's script. Their confrontation is tense because both women believe they're right. Phyllis sees Tessa as a dangerous variable, newly separating, emotionally raw, carrying unresolved turmoil that could spill onto Daniel. Tessa sees Phyllis as a force that calls possession, protection, and control love. When Tessa demands that Phyllis stop interfering in her personal life, the bluntness hits Phyllis like a slap because Phyllis isn't used to someone speaking to her without flinching. Tessa refuses to let Phyllis hide behind motherhood as a shield for sabotage. She insists that whatever exists between her and Daniel is real, not a rebound, not an accident, not a vacancy being filled after divorcing. It is not something Phyllis can decide for Daniel. That certainty pushes the confrontation to its peak. It forces Phyllis to face a truth she hates: that not everyone fears her, and not everyone will step aside to preserve her comfort. Phyllis is startled by how unshakable Tessa is. She isn't accustomed to being met with that kind of calm force. But Phyllis is not fragile, and she is not easily defeated. Instead of exploding, she retreats temporarily. On the surface, it looks like restraint, even a concession. Underneath, it's a strategic adjustment. She maintains enough defiance to signal that this is not over, only relocated. Phyllis's silence is not surrender. It is an unspoken promise that she will find another way, settler, cleaner, leaving fewer fingerprints. Tessa leaves the Grand Phoenix with her pulse racing, but her resolve sharper than ever. She knows she has crossed an important line, the line where she chooses to defend her happiness. She also understands this will make everything harder, but she accepts that. Because if she doesn't protect the relationship now, she will always be bracing, always explaining, always proving herself. She returns to Daniel with a determination not only to love him, but to build trust, like something that must be tended every day, especially when someone keeps trying to cut it at the root. Daniel looks at Tessa and senses the shift in her eyes, a new strength, a new clarity. He feels relief and worry at the same time. Relief because Tessa is not the fragile figure Phyllis tried to paint. Worry because he knows Phyllis won't stop just because someone spoke firmly to her. Daniel stands between two poles: his mother, who has always trained him to believe peace requires compliance, and Tessa, who loves him but loves herself enough not to be crushed. Daniel wants to keep both. He wants a relationship with his mother without letting his mother poison his love. He wants love without turning it into a family war. But he begins to realize that sometimes keeping both is exactly how you lose both. That night, even when everything seems to quiet down, the atmosphere still isn't calm. Phyllis's interference has already left a mark, an unanswered question in Daniel, a sense of being watched in Tessa, Tessa wants to believe her boundary will be respected now. Daniel wants to believe he's strong enough not to be manipulated. But trust doesn't survive on hope alone when someone is actively trying to break it. And Phyllis, despite stepping back, has never been someone who truly stops. When Tessa leans into Daniel with the steadiness of someone prepared to face whatever comes next, Daniel feels the questions he hates most rising inside him anyway. If Tessa is sincere, why did this happen so fast? Why did she have to fight so fiercely? And why does he suddenly feel like he's being pulled into a battle he never chose a side in? He doesn't say it out loud, but his silence begins to take the shape of doubt. And somewhere inside the Grand Phoenix, Phyllis doesn't have to do anything else but wait, because the seed she planted is already inside Daniel, and all it needs is one weak moment to take root. The hook doesn't arrive with a loud twist, but with a small, chilling shift in the rhythm of the story. Just when Tessa believes she has ended Phyllis's interference, Daniel, for a brief, almost invisible moment, instinctively steps back as if weighing something he can't bring himself to say. And Tessa suddenly understands the hardest fight may not be against Phyllis at all, but inside the mind of the man she is trying so desperately to trust. The conflict between Lily and Cain reaches its most tense phase, not because of loud accusations, but because of everything that remains unresolved after Cain's betrayal, everything that still hangs in the air, unnamed and unhealed. For Lily, the fracture isn't simply a mistake in the past. It's the feeling that she once placed her trust into the hands of the one person who understood exactly how to make it collapse. She can look composed on the surface and keep the strong, controlled posture she's known for. But inside she is locked in a long, grinding struggle, the part of her mind that demands she protect herself versus the memories that won't let her completely deny there was a time when Cain felt like home. That struggle is what creates her mixed signals. In moments she is ice cold, as if every door has been shut, and the next she lets a flicker of softness slip through, as if some part of her is still testing whether Cain has truly changed, or whether he's simply performing a more palatable version of himself. Cain, meanwhile, is trapped between the hunger to make amends and the fear of being discarded forever. He sees in Lily not only anger but caution hardened into instinct. Every time he believes he has made progress, Lily sends another contradictory signal that leaves him confused, shaken, and more desperate to prove himself. But the more desperate he becomes, the more he risks showing Lily the one thing she fears most, a man who only changes when he's forced to the edge and who slips back into old darkness the moment he sees an easier way out. Cain cannot deny that he wants forgiveness, but he is starting to understand that Lily's forgiveness isn't a prize for promising to be better. It is the result of a long process in which he must accept being tested, doubted, and even wounded by the very distance he's trying to close. What makes Cain dangerous isn't that he doesn't know he was wrong. It's that he always believes that if he tries hard enough, Lily must eventually give in. And that belief can turn into a subtle form of pressure, making his repentance feel less like humility and more like a strategy to get what he wants. Inside that rising pressure, Phyllis quickly recognizes the crack she knows how to exploit. To Phyllis, Lily's mixed signals are not merely the messy aftermath of heartbreak. They are an opening. She understands the kind of relationship that can be pushed just slightly into a full collapse. Phyllis doesn't need to hate Lily in a simple, straightforward way to interfere. She has a deep, instinctive habit. When she senses hesitation, she turns it into weakness and uses it to bend the outcome. More importantly, Phyllis understands Cain. She knows he can talk about change and act repentant, but that somewhere inside him there is still a shadow on appetite for control, a taste for power, a desire to win by shortcuts. Especially when he feels unrecognized, Phyllis sees that shadow as something to harvest. So instead of watching from the sidelines, Phyllis steps in under the guise of support. Like a mentor whose enthusiasm masks an agenda, she feeds Cain the idea that Lily is playing a push and pull game, keeping him in a position where he must chase, plead, and doubt himself. She frames Lily's distance as a tactic rather than a wound. Then she nudges Cain toward a darker logic, that progress with Lily can't rely on patience and sincerity alone. That sometimes to regain what you lost you have to strike at the other person's weak points. Make Lily fear losing him, make her believe he can walk away at any moment. Phyllis doesn't have to openly say Cain should return to his old self. She is skilled enough to make that conclusion feel like Cain's own idea. And when Cain begins to waver, the real danger isn't simply that he listens, it's that, in the moment he is most desperate, her argument starts to sound reasonable. The central question hovering over every step Cain takes is whether he will risk the fragile progress he has made with Lily by forming an alliance with Phyllis again. Cain knows, on some level, that any association with Phyllis is like black ink spilled on a white shirt. Can cover it temporarily, but under the right light it always shows. The progress he has achieved with Lily hasn't come from leverage or strategy. It has come from moments where he stood still under her anger, listened without defending himself, and admitted his wrongs without turning them into excuses. If he chooses a shortcut now, he won't just betray Lily again in a new form, he will betray the very version of himself he's trying to build. Yet Lily's contradictions make the temptation easier to justify. Kane begins to wonder if he is fighting a battle he can't win, whether Lily truly wants him to change or simply wants him to keep paying forever. And when a man begins to ask those questions, the darkness inside him usually offers the answer that feels easiest to live with. While the Lily-Cephalus triangle simmers like embers being fed by wind, another tension rises in parallel, rooted in old loyalties and shifting alliances. Diane Jenkins is furious as she watches Jack defend Nikki yet again. For Diane, it isn't just kindness or a sense of moral duty. It drags up older wounds about loyalty divided in half, about the feeling that no matter how hard she tries, Jack will always have priorities she can never fully reach. Diane's anger isn't only jealousy or pride. It's fear for that she will always be the one who has to be good enough to be chosen. While Nikki receives Jack's protection as if it's automatic, because history has carved their bond into stone, Diane sees Jack's choice as proof that he is willing to step into battles she cannot control. And that makes her feel unstable, as if the foundation she is trying to build can collapse simply because Jack refuses to draw boundaries. As that atmosphere thickens, Kyle arrives like a variable that is both timely and pressuring. He doesn't come only as a son, he comes as someone who can tip the balance in his parents' favor. His presence steadies Diane, but it also intensifies everything because Kyle is not someone who stands back. He tends to act, to calculate risk, and once he has a lead, he wants to use it to protect what he considers his. To Diane, Kyle is an anchor and a reminder that her family is not something that can be dismissed. To Jack, Kyle is a warning that Jack's choices no longer affect only himself. They ripple outward into Diane's security and the stability they are trying to maintain. In that sense, Kyle becomes the force that pushes this story toward a real turning point instead of allowing it to drift in unresolved emotion. Kyle brings something far more explosive than personal resentment, an update about Victor, using an AI program to wipe out Matt's finances. It isn't delivered like a vague rumor. It lands like a piece that can be locked into place, exposing the true nature of Victor's power game. If Victor has used technology to erase someone's financial life, it isn't merely a dirty business trick. It can signal criminal intent, an act designed to control and destroy. Kyle understands what that means. This could be a path toward proving Victor is operating outside legal boundaries. And once there is a path, the battle is no longer rooted in feelings or suspicion. It becomes a hunt for proven escalation where one wrong move can trigger consequences no one can reverse. That information piles new pressure onto Jack and Diane at exactly the wrong time. Jack is defending Nikki, but Nikki's life is bound to Victor through family, history, and a minefield of loyalties. If Victor truly weaponized AI against Matt, then anyone close to him risks being pulled into the blast radius, at least in the eyes of anyone determined to bring him down. Jack may believe he is doing the right thing by protecting Nikki, but Diane sees the danger. That protection could make Jack vulnerable to being used, or worse, to being dragged into a war Victor always knows how to control. Diane is furious because it feels like Jack is placing their family in danger, simply because he cannot fully sever the old ties. And Kyle's information makes that danger concrete instead of theoretical. In this widening picture, every line is tight. Lily sends mixed signals because she fears being betrayed again, but she also fears becoming someone who locks the door on happiness. Kane is confused because he wants forgiveness, yet he can't tolerate being kept at a distance, so his confusion becomes the exact weakness Phyllis can exploit to pull him toward the dark choices he once swore he would abandon. Phyllis interferes because she believes pushing Kane into his worst instincts is the fastest way to reclaim control of the game, and she always craves the feeling of steering the story. Diane burns with anger because she sees Jack repeating a dangerous habit, offering loyalty in the wrong places and forcing the people beside him to pay the price. Jack is pinned between what he believes is right and what Diane recognizes as a threat. And Kyle steps in with leverage that isn't a gift, it's a fuse, because it can turn Victor from untouchable to prosecutable. And when Victor is cornered, he never responds gently. Then, just when it seems like there might still be time to cool down, to choose words carefully, to delay a decision, the AI revelation shifts the atmosphere from emotional tension to survival tension. This is no longer simply about who is angry, who forgives, who stands with whom. It becomes about who will be pulled into the real power war where a single mistake can erase reputations, finances, and safety. Kane only has to take one more step toward Phyllis to shatter his last chance with Lily. Jack only has to keep shielding Nikki without clearly seeing Victor's shadow behind her to lose Diane's faith. Kyle only has to push his information a little further to ignite a direct collision with Victor. And as night settles over Genoa City, the most frightening element isn't what has been said aloud, it's what everyone is holding back. Lily holds back her true feelings because she refuses to appear weak. Kane holds back the darkest part of himself because he fears failure. Phyllis holds back her next move because she thrives on control. Diane holds back her insecurity because she won't be seen as the one who loses. Jack holds back firm boundaries because he still believes he can balance everything. And Kyle holds the AI detail like a blade capable of cutting a path for his family, or spilling blood in a way none of them can predict. On our TV Spoilers channel, I'm always looking for content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.